I've intentionally waited to talk about GLP-1s because I'm not reactive by nature. And I think that matters, especially when it comes to health. In conventional medicine, we're often reactive. A symptom shows up and we take medication. And sometimes that is appropriate. I'm not anti tools, but they're often given without comprehensive support. And that's where things start to go sideways. But the way I practice functional health and the way I live my life is by always asking why. Why is this happening? What's driving it? And what is the overall context? And before we go any further, I want to be very clear about something. If you're currently on a GLP-1, this episode is not at all meant to shame you or scare you. This is never my intention. In fact, if you are on one or you're considering starting one, this conversation should really help you think more clearly about how to support your body while using it. So today's episode isn't about whether I believe in GLP-1s. This isn't a religion. It is a tool, one that does have data and research behind it. I care about evidence and physiology, and I care about helping women slow down the conversation instead of reacting to whatever health trend is the loudest at the moment. Because reactivity often gets people into trouble. And my goal here is to add context so that you can decide what actually makes sense for you. And part of why I wanted to do this episode is because I'm seeing more women come to us already on these medications, but without the support that they actually need. Because just like with HRT, the real issue isn't the tool, it's the lack of context. So if the whole GLP-1 narrative feels like deja vu, it should. We watched this exact thing happen with hormones. Suddenly everybody was either HRT fixes everything or HRT is dangerous. GLP-1s are kind of following the same path. And when health becomes black and white, women lose, right? Most women I talk to are exhausted by the messaging, they're frustrated, they're overwhelmed, because it feels like overnight everybody is on something. And not enough people are talking about food or muscle or what happens after the weight comes off. And again, when that context is missing, of course, people get skeptical and have questions. So here's where I land. I don't think GLP-1s are bad. I also don't think that they are a magic solution. In my opinion, they aren't a first step, and they certainly do not make lifestyle changes optional. The biggest issue I see isn't the peptide, it's how casually they're being prescribed. High doses, no guidance around food, no protein targets, no strength training conversation, no discussion on thyroid, minerals, gut health, and so on. And that's when side effects happen and women start to feel awful. Not because the tool is inherently bad, but because it's being used without that support. So let's dig into what GLP-1s are. But first, a quick clarification because the language around this can sometimes be confusing. You've probably heard the term peptides. That's the umbrella. They are short chains of amino acids that act as signaling molecules in our bodies. We naturally make many of them. Now, GLP-1s are a specific category of peptides, and the ones that are mostly being talked about right now, those are prescription medications. You've heard of semaglutide, tirzepatide, and the newer one, retatrutide. Then there are other peptides that you may hear about like BPC 157, sermorelin, or PT 141, and there's others, of course, as well. Some are prescription only and commonly offered through medical or telehealth companies. Others may be sold through supplement companies, which is where things get a little murky in terms of quality and regulation. This is why I tend to be cautious with those. I like to look at what's been studied in humans and what's being prescribed or sold responsibly. When people say peptides, they're often lumping different things together. And again, context matters, both in terms of safety and whether something is even appropriate for you. So GLP-1s were originally studied in people with diabetes and insulin resistance, and now they're being used more broadly for metabolic health and weight loss. And we do have human data showing they impact appetite, blood sugar, and inflammation. But most of that research is in metabolic populations, not long-term use in midlife women necessarily. And of course, this is where nuance matters. Rapid weight loss often comes with a loss of lean muscle, especially if protein and strength training are not prioritized. And after 40, muscle is currency. Bone density and mobility matter. And losing weight without protecting those things is not a win, in my opinion, no matter what the scale says. So if you're currently on a GLP-1, There are a few non-negotiables that matter, and this is where most of the conversation online is incomplete. First is eating enough protein. Not whatever sounds good, not skipping meals because you're not hungry, but intentionally meeting your body's protein needs every day so that you're protecting that muscle. Because if appetite is suppressed, you have to be even more intentional about this. You've heard me say over and over again how important it is to consume ample protein. As we lose hormones in perimenopause, it is vital to balance our blood sugar and increase lean muscle mass. Protein is one way of doing that, and too many women underconsume this vital macronutrient. While I recommend getting the majority of your protein from whole foods, I'm also a realist and know that life gets busy and sometimes you just need something on the go. Equip Prime Protein is my go-to grass-fed, non-GMO protein powder. Our clients love it, and it comes in a bunch of delicious flavors, or unflavored if you prefer. You can throw it into a shake, mix it with yogurt, make protein pancakes, or whip up a hot beverage. Try it yourself at equipfoods.com/healthcoachclaudia and save 15% with code healthcoachclaudia. Second is strength training, ideally 2 to 4 times per week. Rapid weight loss without resistance training is one of the fastest ways to end up weaker and metabolically challenged down the line. The biggest mistake I see when using GLP-1s is not supporting overall metabolism. Third is gut support. Constipation is really common on GLP-1s, and you really should not be ignoring this. That's where food choices, hydration, minerals, and gut function really matter. And finally, this is the piece almost nobody talks about. You still need to look at the bigger picture: your thyroid, your nervous system, your stress, and your sleep. The medication does not replace those things. This is why inside the perimenopause method, we don't just look at 1 or 2 tools in isolation. Whether a woman is on HRT, considering a GLP-1, or on one, or not using either of these things, we're always looking at your nutrition, metabolic health, hormones, minerals, gut health, and stress, because that's what determines whether something actually helps you or creates more imbalances in the body. I don't care what new drug, peptide, supplement, or therapy comes out. You cannot bypass eating enough calories for your needs. A lot of women end up significantly under eating on these medications, which may look like progress short term, but it's one of the fastest ways to slow down metabolism long term. Restful sleep, stress regulation, blood sugar regulation, that is a big one. Minerals. When appetite drops, so does your intake, not just your calories, but minerals and electrolytes are critical for your energy, thyroid function, as well as gut and liver health. Tools can support the process, but they do not replace it. And this is often why women come off of these medications and gain the weight back. Not because they did anything wrong, but because the foundation wasn't there. And when the medication is removed, the body goes back to doing what it knows. And if you don't support muscle, nutrition, and metabolism while you're on these medications, your body will fall back to where it started. Even within our team, we've seen both the clinical and personal side of this. This is exactly why we don't focus on weight alone inside the perimenopause method. We're looking at your metabolism, your labs, nutrition, hormones, and how your body is actually functioning, because no single tool works in isolation. So if you're curious, stay curious, but be discerning. Don't let trends think for you. Be mindful of who you're following online. A lot of influencers out there are making a lot of money pushing some of these products. But also, don't let fear or black and white thinking from people who take a stance on something get in the way of a tool that may actually benefit you. Health isn't about choosing sides. It is about understanding your body well enough to use tools wisely. And that's where real change starts to happen. All right, if this episode helped, please leave a rating, review, and share it with another woman who needs to hear it. And if you are a high-achieving woman dealing with exhaustion, mood changes, and stubborn weight, and you want some support, apply to work with us in the perimenopause method. We are open for April enrollment. You can check out the details via the link in the show notes. Hopefully, we'll see you inside. Have a great week. The information provided is for educational and informational purposes only. I am not, nor do I act as a doctor or any other medical professional. I am not providing healthcare, medical services, or attempting to diagnose, treat, prevent, or cure any physical, mental, or emotional disease or condition. The information shared is not intended to be a substitute for the professional medical advice provided by your own medical or mental health provider.